Okay, I did a video on guilty pleas, and like there's this point I kind of scoffed, and I was like, how do you define voluntary? That's one little part of a guilty plea. I want to expand on that because I think there's something important there. There's some interesting aspects. This isn't a practical video, so this is going to help you with your charges, but maybe someone will find it interesting. What does it mean to voluntarily enter a guilty plea? The question. My name is Nelson J. Peters. I'm a lawyer in Moncton, New Brunswick. I do criminal defense, and I always have these questions, so I'm putting it out there. What does voluntarily mean? This is important because it's in the law, and I'm a lawyer. The words are my tools, so I got to lean on the law a little bit here. Again, this is section 606 sub 1.1 of the Criminal Code of Canada, which states a court may accept the plea of guilty only if it is satisfied that the person is A, making the plea voluntarily. Okay, voluntarily. What does that mean? You know, good question. So I Googled it. All that it gives me is of one's own free will, right? Which is kind of, what we figured, I guess. Freedom though. Freedom, Braveheart freedom, right? What does that mean? I think it's one of those things we think we know, but we don't, which is actually pretty much everything. But it's also got a practical aspect here. Like I said in the other one, like what does it mean to freely enter a guilty plea? And I kind of went over it. That's why I want to go more into this. This is like a fundamental philosophical question. What is free will? So, I studied this stuff. I spent months talking about freedom. It was great. It doesn't amount to a whole lot. But, what does that mean? Freedom. The first thing that comes to my mind is freedom from what? Right? What is freedom? So I'll go a few centuries back here. The German philosopher Hegel made freedom the basis of his philosophy. So he thought fundamentally what makes us human is freedom, self-determination, I guess you could call it. The ability to do what you choose, to become what you envision, I guess. I got a link to it on the bottom there, which has some information about Hegel, but he just found this idea of freedom so captivating and so important that he made it the basis of his philosophy. His philosophy was amazing. Like in the, 19th century, that he was teaching in Germany. Like he was like a rock star. Like everyone went to his lectures. A lot of that like mid-19th century idealism in Germany was, I would say, at least Hegel was a contributing factor. All of these ideas of the Enlightenment that are being played out. Hegel just takes it and runs with it, like he does aesthetics, like the history of art with a focus on freedom. Amazing, right? It's interesting because Marx was like reacting to that, right? And a lot of people don't know who Hegel is, but pretty much everyone knows who Marx is. Karl Marx, father of communism, right? He wrote the Communist Manifesto. So he flips this and he says, well, everything's about material. He calls himself a materialist, or other people call him, right? It's all about like how material affects us as human beings and determines us, right? Which is kind of interesting because he writes Das Kapital, capital, and he basically invents modern economics, which is used by these like capitalist corporations. So much there, but I'll leave it there. So we've got on the one hand this idea of like radical self-determination, freedom. Humans are fundamentally free. They're born into the world. They can create whatever they want out of themselves, maybe within certain parameters, maybe within certain limits. But like that's, this is taken by the existentialist. Freedom, that's who we are. Jean-Paul Sartre talks about this as well. Compare that with determinism, okay? That's the idea that everything, even our moral choices, are determined by, other causes. Marx said it was material. You could do the sociological thing where you talk about, someone's early childhood. How a person reacts under stress will be determined largely by unconscious forces. you know, and like you see it in the courts, like it's pretty much, right? It's like I got trained for like a couple of days by this lawyer who was very experienced. He was a hardcore determinist. He's like he's talking to me and he's like, yes, well, you know, oh, so you're a criminal defense lawyer, you're duty counsel, okay. Well, here's our role. We're here to whitewash the criminalization of poverty, mental illness, and addiction. And I was like, oof. And then you spend some time and you're like, pretty much. Anyways, there's other people who talk about this, like Sam Harris talks about this. I'm going to put a link to The Illusion of Free Will. I haven't read it very in depth. I don't really like Sam Harris. Like, I know he's a smart guy, but he's just so self-satisfied. Can't take it. Plus, he's a determinist. That's no fun. Okay, so I've introduced these like abstract notions of philosophy. What is freedom? Like, who cares? Because, you know, I'm in docket court and the judge is calling you up and we've got like 5 minutes to figure out what are you going to do. So what does voluntarily mean in the context of the justice system? Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? Like, okay, here's my thing. This is why I kind of scoffed there, okay? It's just like, so this guy's making a decision of his own free will. So how is that possible when you got that binary choice? Guilty, not guilty, okay? That's all the judge wants to hear from you, okay? Well, you can plead not guilty, but you don't have bail. So you're going to sit for weeks, probably months, even if you didn't do it, right? Until you get your trial and you're proven not guilty, or not proved not guilty, you're found not guilty. The Crown hasn't proved their case. Like 85% of Canadians who are in custody are in pretrial custody, so they haven't been convicted yet. Like, no one's talking about this. Anyways, how are you free? How are you entering a guilty plea voluntarily when you don't understand what you're charged with? The law is too complicated. You know, like reading Section 606, you know, you need someone to help you through that. Like Clause I, whatever. Like, I'm just frustrated because, like, this affects people and my ability to inform them in a very small amount of time. What about, are you making a free decision of your own free will voluntarily when you don't know why you were charged? Right? Like, I'll see this a lot with, like, threats or harassment, right? They're like, well, what are they talking about? I didn't do anything wrong. And, you know, half the time it's like, buddy. But, you know, the other half, I'm like, I don't know. And the big thing is you don't find out. You know, the prosecutor doesn't tell you. They tell you on this date at this time against this person you were charged of uttering a threat. They don't say what you said. You have to get your disclosure for that. Oh, the RCMP needs like a month. Fair enough. But it's just like, why don't they have it ready? You know, it's like every single person needs their disclosure and they never have it ready for the first appearance. Sometimes for 2 or 3. You know, like, who's that on? You know, and the guy comes 3 times. He's like, why am I coming to court? Well, how are you making a decision to plead guilty voluntarily when you can't afford a lawyer? And your other choice, you can rep yourself, self-represent. Really? You're going to do that on like a DUI? You know, you're going to learn the charter and read jurisprudence? Some guys can do it. Power to them. But this is what I always say to the guys, right? It's like, okay, so you're on this side and he's on this side. There's the prosecutor against you, right? So imagine I asked you to build a table and I gave you a hammer and I gave you nails and some wood. You could probably build a table, right? Here's the thing. You're going to be going up against a carpenter and all he does is build tables. You know, it's like, who's going to build a stronger table here? Is it going to be the carpenter or you? And yeah, you know, being not guilty helps. But like, not guilty in the sense that you didn't do what they're saying you did, right? And there's so many shades of gray to that. But I'm just like, is being self-represented a viable choice? And lawyers' costs are ridiculous. You know, I always say, I'm going to run out of these sayings, but I always say, like, I'm a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. You know, like, it is what it is. How are you making a decision of your own free will voluntarily when the system is in control of every aspect of the procedure except for one narrowly defined choice? I mean, You can rail against the system all you want, and the system's never going to be perfect. We're not expecting that, but is it voluntary? What do you think? You know? Like the example I talked about in the other video, the guy who comes up, he says, I didn't do this, but I just want to plead guilty, right? What happens then? Like I said, maybe the judge says, okay, well, enter not guilty plea. What usually happens is the guy's like, no, 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 no. Okay, no, I did it. And you do this thing, right? Here's my 2 cents, my commentary. The net effect is that the decision that is made, whether to accept this or not, is more concerned with the appearance, the form of a voluntary plea, rather than the actual thing. Fair enough, to a certain extent, those two are tied together. But when you see these guys, imagine if you were, that was your brother who was getting sentenced, and he didn't telling you the whole time how he didn't do it, but it's like, what am I going to do? Pay $5,000 for a lawyer, drag this out for another 6 months? I'll just plea. And then, he says that to the judge, and the judge is like, essentially bullies them. It's like this is all really abstract. My point is, right, is that so is justice. We think we know what it is. Usually if you've been charged and you think you've been charged wrongfully, you're going to think justice is getting what you want, right? Is that what justice is? And the net effect, again, the overall impression is that the system's more worried about the appearance of justice than actual justice. And I know that there's a lot of unpacking to do with making a statement like that, but if you spend time in court, I think you know what I mean. Like, the system isn't working. People are losing belief. The left hand doesn't know what the right is doing. Like happens to me all the time. I go in to talk to the guy for the first day. He says, you don't know anything about my charges? No, I don't. I'm here to talk to you to learn about your charges. But this guy was wasted. He doesn't remember. What I end up doing is finding out the police's version, the summary of a summary that the prosecutor has, and then going back and talking to the guy. And by that time, we got either plea or he sits in jail for a week. The point is, I think that there's, some serious issues here, and it speaks to the basis of belief in the justice system. And based on what I see, I think that people would be justified in having their doubts. What are we going to do about it? The feeling that you get from anyone involved with the justice system is an overwhelming apathy. Not so much, for individual cases. Yeah, you can hire me. Maybe we'll beat your charges. Maybe you'll be okay. But the system is getting worse, and it's probably going to continue to be that way. This is just one tiny aspect. This is one word of one subsection of the criminal code. You see how we can drag this stuff out forever? Anyways, I'm going to stop it there. We're finished. Thank you.